Hi, it's Ted Brown. Been with you before, and it's been my pleasure to have worked with Financial Leadership Academy from the very beginning, particularly serving as a coach in FLA 1 and FLA 2. So it's good to be with you to talk about dealing with resistance today.
Hi, I'm Andy Lunt. Likewise, I appreciate the opportunity to share with you today about the subject of dealing with resistance. Ted and I are convinced that you probably have already encountered some resistance, and if you haven't, we can assure you that you will. So we want to recall some of the things that we learned from Roland Livingston a whole year ago when he helped us to understand what resistance really is. And the first thing I think is that it's a predictable and natural reaction against the process of being helped. Healing, learning, growing all involve encountering resistance, a predictable, natural, and necessary part of learning, and a healthy, self-regulating manifestation that must be respected. Sometimes we shy away from resistance, we resent resistance, but it helps to know that it is a predictable, natural, healthy aspect of growth, whether that's in our physical bodies or in an organism such as the church. So continuing on with resistance, sometimes we make resistance something negative when it's really not, and we use it as an arrogant term for someone else's disagreement with the direction that I want them to take. It's a big mistake to assume that someone who is resisting is an enemy. In fact, they can be a very healthy partner in the process of growing by helping us to take a more realistic approach. And sometimes, as Roland very helpfully reminded us, resistance can be within us as well. It can be a defense against confronting a difficult or unpleasant reality. And sometimes it's what stops us from dealing with steps toward growth. But we also recognize that that also can manifest itself in the members of the congregation with whom we're attempting to work. And here's a real key. Resistance is the mobilization of energy in the face of a perceived or real threat. I might go almost so far as to say if you're not encountering some resistance, maybe your action step isn't big enough. Almost anything worth doing is going to encounter resistance at some level. And so when you see that energy, what that means is that people care about the steps that are attempting to be made. And so that's a good sign, not a bad sign, that they're invested in what you're proposing. Mobilization of energy is a good thing. It's part of healthy resistance. So what are some of the ways that we tend to encounter resistance? Resistance wears many faces. It can often be confusion. We can mistake people's apparent lack of understanding as a resistance. Their knee-jerk immediate criticism can also be a resistance manifestation. Denial, of course, is a big one. People will simply ignore. Malicious compliance, passive-aggressive behavior can certainly be an opportunity for people to express their resistance. Much worse, of course, is outright sabotage, where people will do things behind the scenes in outside conversations and even in actions that will tend to undermine the direction that you're seeking to move the congregation. As can be too easy agreement. If people simply seem to jump on board without any consideration, that may well be a resistance, because what that means is you're going to count on them, and down the road they may not be there for you to count on. Deflection, people will try to change the subject and move things in another direction. Outright silence. What silence means really is apathy, and that's counter to the manifestation of energy, the mobilization of energy we talked about before. That can be not a very helpful thing. And then in-your-face criticism. We've all encountered this, I suspect, and sometimes this is the most difficult part of resistance to deal with because it feels like a personal attack. But we all have some ways that we respond to resistance. And some of these are helpful and some are not. So one of the ones, of course, we call upon the office of the pastor. I'm the pastor and you're not. And so we attempt to use the power of our position. Or we simply ignore resistance and plow ahead without acknowledging and dealing with the resistance. Sometimes we try to apply the force of reason. We try to argue people into agreeing with the direction. That usually doesn't work because very often the resistance is emotional and not logical, and so we need to deal with that as well. Or sometimes, and this is really counterproductive and not really an appropriate use of the pastoral role, we try to manipulate those who oppose us and put them into positions where they don't have a leg to stand on, or where they're forced to come along. And sometimes, of course, we play off relationships. We try to use other people to carry the message for us, and to say, well, if you really care about me, or if you really care about this person, then you need to come along. But that's not a healthy way. Or we make deals. Well, compromise, collaboration, those are healthy ways of dealing with resistance, but sometimes those deals are counterproductive, especially if we take a short-term gain that's contrary to the long-term direction. And sometimes, of course, we kill the messenger. We've been on the receiving end of that ourselves when people attack us because we are the ones who are bringing an unpleasant message. But that's really an irresponsible thing for us to do. Or to give in too soon and simply throw our hands up and say, okay, I can't deal with this. Let's move on to something else. So a couple of things that really don't work, and these are the things that can result when we use some of these unhealthy responses to resistance. They very often will increase the resistance. And that's, of course, making life more difficult and gives us fewer options in going forward. And if we use the power or one of those default positions that we sometimes use, we may discover that the win may not be worth the cost. We may win the battle and lose the war if the war is a unified congregation moving forward. And very often the default positions will fail to create the kind of synergy and energy, the positive synergy and energy that can create the momentum for carrying out the desired change. Fear and suspicion can be a result. Very often people will wonder, they'll begin to doubt the credibility and the trustworthiness of the pastor and others seeking to respond to the resistance. And so we want to try and be transparent and trustworthy in all that we do, even in the face of resistance. And of course, resistance can drive dealing our default positions in dealing with resistance can very easily separate us from others whom we're going to need for the long haul. So those are some of the things that really don't work when we fall back to our default positions.
So we've talked about how you can improperly react to change, and the resistance that comes with that. So let's talk about the right way to think about that. The first step is really knowing that resistance is going to happen in any kind of change effort. And that resistance is usually very positive, as Andy has said, because it represents that the fact that people are interested. They are listening to what you're proposing as a team. So let's think about how is the best way to approach that. So you want to first anticipate the impact of the change. So those are very common steps of really thinking about what's the likely impact on an individual, a team, the entire congregation, or even the community. Think about who will be impacted and how and what degree they will experience the impact of the change, and then try to anticipate the reaction that the individuals will have. And individuals are going to react differently to this. Some are going to be interested in the details and concerned about not all the details being laid out. Others are going to be impacted in terms of, well, how does it affect me socially? Others are going to be concerned about the impact on the building. So you have to look at the change that you're proposing from all those different aspects and how people might react. And then identify, based upon your anticipation, where the points of mutual gain are going to be and the growth opportunities for your church. And just as important to acknowledge that there's going to be losses. We know many churches where there are many memories in that church. And the change you're talking about means that some of those memories may be left behind. And so you don't want to just go forward without looking behind. You want to be able to honor the past while helping people see the value of moving forward in the future. So how are you going to look at all this given that anticipation of the change? You develop strategies. How are you going to go into communicating? Whom are you going to communicate with? When are you going to communicate? And where are you going to communicate? And use your generosity or your laity team to help you build these strategies for building a commitment. Communicate, communicate, communicate. It doesn't matter how much you communicate. Somebody will tell you, you didn't tell me. So you want to continue to communicate as much as you can in every possible way, through your sermons, through your emails, your newsletters, your Facebook account, your Zoom meetings. Connect everything to your change. In the change efforts I've led, I actually create a symbol for the change. And that symbol appears in all publications that we use, and you help connect people to that symbol. And then assess the commitment to the change effort. Are people just kind of sitting there like dry bones? Or are they excited about where you're headed? And if they are sitting there like dry bones, try to use your laity team to think about, all right, what are the issues? Why aren't we generating the excitement we thought we would? And through that feedback, be able to either change your strategy or change your communication. Now, there are a lot of things that you can use to deal with resistance, and there are models and frameworks that can help guide your response. Karen presented the A, B, C, D, E's of conflict in the first session, and Roland presented the William Bridges model in the second session. I personally use a model called a respectful contrary, where I listen to the individual, feed back to them what I heard them say so that they know that I am listening, tell them how that makes me feel, and then have a dialogue about how I might go forward. Use a model that you feel most comfortable with. All models work. Some work better than others for certain individuals. Then as you're having the dialogue, ask if the resistance will impede or accelerate the progress towards God's vision for your church. We've emphasized identity and purpose for the church and how important it is. And it has to be an overriding purpose. You have to have something where the individual can see that their resistance does not allow you to move forward as a congregation towards God's vision. And that vision is an item that you want to continue to go back again and again to that individual and let them think about the question, will your concerns either delay us from reaching our goal or help us get there faster? And certainly don't respond in email. It's got to be a personal contact dealing with resistance. And I know that's difficult in these times, but use the telephone, use Zoom, or a face-to-face meeting, meaning you might want to meet somewhere outdoors where you maintain social distancing and are able to have a dialogue with that person. So what we'd like you to do is, as an action step, is pick a person or a group where you have resistance and utilize one of the frameworks to address this particular issue within your church. And it's okay that you might stumble a little bit the first time you use it, but continue to use that framework or model, and you'll find that it works easier and easier with each application. So good luck, because resistance will always be there. So you're the leader, you need to be transparent, authentic. The way to do that is to openly deal with resistance in a very spiritual way.